Right. Welcome to Climate Courage. My name is Andrea Edwards. And just a reminder that Climate Courage is all about talking about what we can do to act on the planetary crisis. So today we're going to address a topic that I'm very, very passionate about, and that is how do we address our excessive fashion consumption? So, this is one of those topics that I really, really struggle with. We know how bad the fashion industry is. And of course, we need clothes, right? Of course. But we keep seeing the images of the landfills in Africa filled with fast fashion and clothes that we may only ever wear once. We've read the reports on the environmental destruction of the fashion industry right across the board, including the deforestation in the Amazon because of our leather goods. We've watched buildings collapse and thousands of women killed because they're working in very unsafe conditions and they're part of a supply chain where the brands are not paying attention to the life that's in their system. But regardless of whether or not we know the true cost of the fashion industry, we continue to support it. And that's something that I really struggle with. And, how do we change that mindset? And how do we start doing the right thing, especially by the people in the supply chain? But today, to help me understand this industry, because I definitely don't position myself as an expert when it comes to fashion, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome four professionals who I have incredible respect for their passion, for their commitment, and their knowledge on the fashion industry. So first up, I am going to introduce you to one of my great friends, Jenny Thorman. She's calling in from Melbourne. And Jen is the founder of My Best Friend Jen, that's your brand. And she is also a studio manager at Second Stitch, which is a social enterprise in Melbourne. So I'm looking forward to hearing all about that. Then we have someone who I've known since she was in high school, and because I'm friends with her mum. I'm also friends with her. And that is Stephanie Dixon. So Steph founded Green is the New Black, and that's a brand and an event and a content platform that she's taken global, and it's really phenomenal. But you're also hosting a podcast called Live Wide Awake, and you've got another brand called Untamed, which I want to hear more about. So thanks, Steph. I'm really happy you came and joined us today.
Yes, thanks for having me.
All right, we have one chap in the mix, and that is the lovely Ray Padgett. So nice to have you here. So Ray is the founder and CEO of The Fashion Pulpit, and he's going to talk a lot more about that. But he's also a fashion designer and a sustainable fashion advocate. So Ray, awesome to have you here.
Glad to be here.
And finally, the incredible Susanna Jaffa. And she is the founder of Zeren. And I actually met Susanna in her former life where she was a fashion and beauty editor at Expat magazine, right? Expat Life magazine.
Expat Living, yeah.
Expat Living. Oh, God, I knew I was going to get it wrong. Okay, so just to give everyone a sense of what you guys all do, Susanna, do you want to kick it off and just give us an insight into Zeren? But just before we do, Ray, I think you've got some background noise there. Do you want to just mute? See if it's. Sure. I think it's you. Is that better? Yeah, the noise is gone. All right, Susanna, tell us about Zeren and what you're doing there.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. Yep. Thanks for introducing me. My name's Susanna. I'm the founder of Zeren. So, Zeren is a multi-concept platform founded in 2018. It's really a destination that really combines commerce, content, and brand consulting with the mission of championing emerging brands, mindful consumption, and responsible production. So, on a business model perspective, we're an omnichannel retail marketplace, and we also have a media/creative agency. So we're working with brands in different ways, and we have a B2B and B2C kind of audience. We create a lot of content at the same time to kind of demystify sustainable living, sustainable fashion, and, I guess a larger mission and a personal mission is to help create more connection within the industry, retail, it specifically in between all stakeholders, because I believe it's that kind of lack of empathy that has led us into a lot of the problems that we see today. So trying to kind of better connect consumers, brands, supply chain, industry, producers to kind of move together towards a more brighter, positive future for fashion is kind of our overarching kind of North Star, basically.
Nice. That's I love the work you do, and I've just shared the link, so go and check out Zarin. Ray, the Fashion Pulpit, you just had an anniversary, right?
Yes, we did. We just turned 4 this year. So the Fashion Pulpit is basically a fashion circular hub that we are trying to advance all the sustainable fashion practices, but we're focusing more on clothes swapping, and we do a lot of upcycling as well. Thrifting and also education, because I think education plays a vital role if you are trying to change the mindset on how we can be a more responsible consumer. So that's us in a nutshell.
All right. I'm just going to see if I can get us bigger. Let's see if, there you go. I'm not a StreamYard expert. Steph, okay, so Green is the New Black. You launched that, was it a decade ago? Feels like it.
Not quite a decade. It was 7.5 years ago. So we launched in 2015. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been incredible to watch what you've done. It's gone global. I mean, not many people can achieve that. But you're also doing a lot of other things, and I know you've got a lot of other ambitions in the future. So give us a summary of the past, and then also what you're willing to share about where you're looking to go next.
Yeah, so I actually used to work in fashion. I used to run fashion festivals around Asia, which was always a dream job. And then I basically had an epiphany and an awakening where I understood that fashion was one of the most polluting and socially corrupt industries in the world. And that led me on a very deep sustainability rabbit hole where I basically then birthed Green is New Black in 2015. And our mission is really taking complicated issues and breaking them down into little green steps to help people along with their sustainability journeys. And we do that through media and content online, and also large-scale conscious festivals where we've now gathered, I think, almost 30,000 people over the years, and normally about 5,000 for each event. So that's sort of like the big pillar that we do. And about a year ago, I was in Glasgow during COP. And I just got really jaded with the conversation and how governments were watering down, all the commitments and everything. And I ended up stumbling into a Web3 rabbit hole and actually got really excited to be learning again and to be just discovering a whole new type of technology and way of doing things. And for me, I got very excited about how blockchain can actually help to solve some of the world's problems, and some both environmental and social. And so after about 6 months of having my head deep in research, I co-founded a community for women in Web3 to learn about this technology, to not be left behind, but also making sure that we're really focusing on it through an impact lens. Because while there's a lot of controversy and misunderstanding about this technology, there's also a lot of good that can be achieved with it. And so I'm really trying to get people to focus their attention on the good side and what it can solve, than the money grabs and everything else that kind of, has like the bad opinion of. So that's the two different worlds that I'm in, but I'm fusing them into one.
Yeah, nice. That's I didn't know that, so that you were doing that. So that's awesome. Jen?
Yeah, I have an upcycling brand called My Best Friend Jen, but I also have a brand for women who commute via bicycle, which is a very big form of transportation here in Melbourne. And the product is made to last, made to be repaired, and we incorporate like zero waste pattern making, and try and use end-of-line products or fabrics. I also work as my day job at Second Stitch, and we're a non-for-profit training organisation. We work with new migrant and refugee status Australians to educate them in the clothing and textile industry, and hopefully gain community. It's a place to practice English. It's a place to learn new skills and hopefully find meaningful work. But we also have 2 social enterprises that run from there as well. A production team. Our production team works with brands. Well, we use a lot of fabrics that are donated to us, but we also work with end of roll from some Melbourne's larger brands to turn them into accessories so that there's less waste being disposed of or just sitting around doing nothing. And then we also have a alterations and repair department as well. So giving clothing the opportunity to, breathe it new life again. But we also work with, again, some other brands based in Melbourne to be their official alterations and repair department too. So making sure that we're keeping clothing and textiles out of landfill, really.
Yeah.
That's the ambition.
Yeah. Nice. And there's such a massive need for that. All right, so let's get stuck in, because I know Ray's a busy man and he's got something scheduled immediately after this. But I want to start with fast fashion, and I say it wrong, but Shein, and I know that there's a more Chinese way of using the word, but my mouth doesn't do that. Anyway, it's been in the spotlight the last few weeks, and it's basically about the slave-like conditions of the employees in the supply chain. They've talked about how this tiny income that these typically ladies make, and they're working 7 days a week. It's a terrible business. And Shein in particular has been raking in the profits. They are of equal value to H&M and Uniqlo together, right? And its growth, the numbers, I can share them later, off the charts. And they grew dramatically during the pandemic. And even though we know that what they do is bad for the environment, we're still supporting them. And they're obviously not the only fast fashion brand, but they're now the biggest. So I just want to really talk about what are our views of fast fashion, and can we stop this beast, because the growth predictions are off the charts. And just before I hand it over to Susanna, just give you an essence of what fast fashion is, how it's defined. And this is from that article in The Guardian when they were talking about it. Fast fashion is designed or engineered to fit in with busy lives. Low prices invite low maintenance, cheaper and quicker to chuck than to launder and iron. So basically, we're now treating our clothes like a coffee cup from Starbucks. And to me, that's just shocking, right? Low risk, or so it appears, because it's cheap. You buy it in haste, it doesn't fit, who cares? You just chuck it out. And the convenience is unrivaled. Swipe, click, and answer the door. It almost sounds like a dating app. And obviously the celebrities, the social media influencers, they're a big part of its success. They're, showing off their items. I don't know if you guys saw Billie Eilish wore the same item for a second time, and it was called recycling. And it's like, that to me is re-wearing. But it's crazy where we've allowed to, if we really are at the point where clothes have such little respect that we don't even wear them before we throw them out. So Susanna, do you want to sort of just jump in and sort of give your view of the fast fashion industry?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone watching this, we can kind of ascertain already that fast fashion is a problem inherently within its business model. Just for many of the reasons that you've described, Andrea, they can be applied to, insert brand name here, in terms of the practices. I think in my view, if I can break it down simply, there's three key areas and reasons why I feel like we need to fix and rethink the fast fashion business model. Because, disclaimer, I'm also a realist right now, that I don't feel like it's going anywhere anytime soon. So condemning brands isn't actually helping. So I'm in this mode of thinking about solutions at the moment. So number one, yes, three core areas really for me, and why it's such an issue is, yes, supply chain. Historically, the fast fashion supply chain is notoriously opaque. From, a factory level really is where, all of our garments are made by someone, a human, even if they're operating machines. And I think that what really came to light more so over the last 5 years, and increasingly with the pandemic, is, just the poor working conditions, and often just very questionable working conditions that brands are allowing their clothes to be made under. I mean, you can hark back to the Rana Plaza factory collapse as a big instigator and like a woke moment for a lot of brands and consumers to realize, the impact of, cheap labor and therefore cheap practices. But I think it's this lack of awareness for and lack of respect and, again, empathy for people who are making our clothes, which is a really, really big issue. And it's and it's inextricably tied to socioeconomic situations. A lot of our clothes are made in developing countries with looser or more lax or deliberately lax labor laws. It's no but that being said, there's also labor exploitation when it comes to fashion happening in developed countries too. So that is one really, really big issue that needs addressing. And there's lots of organizations like Remake, Fashion Revolution, and many individual brands who are kind of trying to raise awareness of this issue, but it's still something that's not really understood, I feel, by a mainstream consumer who is only concerned about how much their clothes are costing in the shop or online. The other thing for me is materials. So a lot of the fabrics that typically fast fashion brands use are synthetic. So that's polyester, that's nylon, that's acrylic. And the reason why these are such an issue, beyond the fact that they are produced with such frequency, Shein's numbers are one thing. You've got Zara, you've got Inditex Group, you've got all of the rest of the fast fashion brands you've all kind of grown up with, right? Those fabrics are not biodegradable. So they are essentially the same. Polyester dress is, polyester itself as a fabric, and all of these synthetic fabrics are derived from fossil fuels. So if you're angry about single-use plastic and plastic bottles in the ocean and all of these kind of things, you should also be thinking about these fabrics and like the fabrics that you're actually buying and wearing, because the majority of us are wearing plastic on a day-to-day basis, and these could be plastic blends as well, because you can blend synthetics with natural fibers, and that is an infrastructure problem because it's quite difficult to recycle. So a dress that you've thrown out 30 years back could still be festering away in a landfill somewhere, and that's kind of frightening. So, but on a large scale, when it comes to fast fashion, that's another massive thing that needs change and fixing. A lot have responded by opting to recycle, but that's not necessarily fixing the core issue of overproduction of fabrics, or using, recycled synthetic textiles still do not biodegrade. So that's kind of a problem that a lot of brands are looking to solve. The next problem really, I think, it comes down to that mindset shift and consumer attitudes, because what fast fashion has done, I think, historically, in the way that we've all grown up with it as a cultural phenomenon, is we have come to expect clothes to cost a certain price. And therein kind of lies the crux of the issue when you come to trying to make the industry more sustainable, using better fabrics, paying higher wages, fixing and improving that supply chain means cost increases. It just has to. And at Zarin, we work with a number of sort of smaller independent brands who are kind of championing all these things, but they are more of a mid-tier price point and cannot compete with the price of fast fashion. It's just not possible. Even Zara cannot compete with the price of Shein, which I'd classify as more of an ultra fast fashion brand. So I feel like we as consumers have come to expect this, and therefore that need to change our habits that's a big kind of roadblock in terms of mindset shift, and I think that's even harder because it's changing attitudes and changing culture. And those are three big areas where I feel fast fashion has had the most detrimental effects.
Yeah, nice. Steph, Ray, Jen? I totally agree with you on the shaming front. Like, it's not working. So we've got to address this in a different way. Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast today, actually, from ABC called Threads, and it's just such a multifaceted issue. I just don't know if we as individuals can have like the willpower. Like when you look at who's buying it, they're not going to stop. I don't know how we can spread that message any further, because this message has been around for 100 years. The first factory fire was in New York in a shirting factory. And prior to Rana Plaza collapsing, similar conditions that were happening in Bangladesh was what happened 100 years ago in New York, where they were working their labour to long hours, locking them in overnight, and so that they couldn't take breaks or leave. And a fire started, and that was happening throughout Bangladesh before Rana Plaza. Andrea, you talk about a rope monster that is, it comes up on your beach. In places like Ghana, they have textile monsters.
Yeah.
They're like tangles of garments wrapped up and entwined on each other and embedded in the sand. I just don't know if we are capable as a human race to do anything to stop ourselves from buying it. And there's so many influences and reasons why we buy, and they make it easier for us as well. I couldn't help but think while listening to this podcast, like, when is the government going to step in? Why? Like, it just, when they're talking about these tons of textile garments that are being produced, what about tariffs? What about reducing the amount of textiles that are being imported in any one country? Like, I don't know if that's the answer either, but it just kind of made me think, if we can't address it as individuals, why won't our government? And of course they won't, because they want us to consume. It's good for the country for us to be spending money. So yeah, it's such a huge issue. And I don't think there's going to be one answer. I think it needs to come from everybody, from our governments. I don't think Shein's going to stop themselves. Why would they? They're making so much money.
Yeah. That's an area of China that got absolutely hammered in the 70-day drought, right? So the infrastructure that supports the business. I mean, so surely China's going to have to look at itself. I mean, I can see the southern part of China having to migrate up north because the south will become unlivable. So I mean, China's going to have to face the climate emergency because they're facing it in reality, right? And I think it's the fashion sector is responsible for the same amount of emissions as flying and the shipping industry combined. So it's a massive impact on global emissions. And some point the government's going to get serious, right?
Yeah, and it takes 3 days now to get from an idea from a designer, or really it's stolen. It's a stolen idea. It takes 3 days now to get it out and into the shelves, where it used to take 9 months. So not only is labour cheap from these countries, that and if it's not, cheap labour just moves from country to country basically. So wherever the labour masses are, there will be cheap labour, but now it's even cheaper to get it into the store because you don't have that 9 months worth of production planning and design, and sorry. It just overwhelms me with how big the issue is, and it makes me almost speechless, because it's just such a huge, multifaceted problem, and it's going to take some multifaceted answers and resolutions to solve the problem.
Yeah. Steph?
Yeah, I think for me, I focus a lot on the psychology aspect and just why there is such a huge gap in what people say and what the action they actually take. And this has always been the part that I always find fascinating. And, there's like report after report that keeps saying, Gen Z are going to be environmentally sustainable. I've even seen one report that came out recently that called them like the sustainability generation. And there was a 2021 Zalander report that actually looked at like the attitude behavioral gap. And in general, it's like, 60% say that transparency is important to them, and then it's like 20% actually actively seek out information. And all the stats are kind of like that. It's, like 50% say this and then none of them actually do it. And I just think this is not just for Gen Z. This is like a, multi-generational problem. And I think what we've kind of understood is people really still, unfortunately, in the masses, view sustainability as a sacrifice. They view it as something that they have to give up in the short term, or that they have maybe there's like social status, like, associated with buying certain products, and they're just not willing to give that up yet. Or, they just really see that their actions, like, it's so small, like how do my actions really matter? People look at it as like, oh, I'm just like a drop in the ocean. But I think this is part of the big problem is we have these psychological barriers and we have these attitude gaps, and we need to figure out, okay, but how do we make people realize faster that all of those small actions is part of the collective change that is required? And I know that's the solution, but it's also like a big part of the problem, because people think, well, no one else is doing it, or, like, why should I have to do it and other people don't? And there's just still this kind of push and pull, which is really difficult to like deeply understand. And I'm certainly not a psychology major, but I do find it really fascinating to try and deep dive and understand, like, what is it that's really driving people? Because I look at myself, and obviously everyone on this call, we've all had our awakenings. I had mine like 7.5 years ago, and it took me a while to like completely detox fast fashion out of my life, because I was definitely one of those people that was purchasing every month and getting deliveries to the house. But eventually I just couldn't do it anymore. It didn't align with my values. And I really, there was a shift in my psychology where I realized, actually, no, I feel better. And I know that it's better for my skin. It's better for my family. It's better, in general. And I'm part of the collective that's actually, trying to push for more. And then it's this beautiful process of discovery where you then, I fell into pre-loved and, whatever, we can go deep into all of that stuff. But I think, what is it? I still can't kind of unlock how to activate more people faster. And I think everyone's on their own journey with it. And it's like, there's so much hard facts thrown in our face every day. There's so much negativity, and even this like Shein stuff that's happening right now. I mean, it's all over my Instagram, and I know I live in an echo chamber, but everyone seems to be talking about it in different like groups that I'm part of as well. So people are talking about it, and how many are actually going to take action for that? And what do we really have to do to drive more? At what point are they just so numb? And I think a huge part of it is because they're not directly experiencing it. It's the same with climate change. Like, only once people start to really directly feel the impact, or they see it, or it starts affecting their daily lives, are they going to realize how big this is and the part they're going to have to play moving forward. So I think there's the distance and the disconnect, and then there's this attitude and psychology thing, and then there's fashion. I mean, there's all the emotions and all the aspiration and everything that goes around with it, because we've grown up in a consumerist society. So all of those messages have been ingrained in us, and they're coming at us a million times a day. So, I also read a really interesting report that said that a lot of people, they may be vegan, or they see themselves as environmentalists, or they won't fly as much, but it's hard for them to make the jump with fashion still, because of, I think, all of those intrinsic and emotional values as well. So it's such a fascinating conversation, and there's just so much depth to it, and we can go so deep. But I guess that's kind of where I get stuck.
Yeah, right.
I think they make it easier to pay as well. So it's not just all that emotional stuff, but when you've got something in your hand and all your credit card details are stored in here as well, and you're getting this like emotions about something that you want to buy, it's just a couple of clicks away. It's easy. It's too easy. Yeah.
One of the industries that's really been taken to task at the moment is the marketing, advertising, PR industry. I don't know if you guys have been monitoring that. That's my field, so I've certainly been paying attention. So really tackling that and aspirational marketing, and that the whole psychology of that. And also, like I think when you wake up and when you sort of step out of the trap of consumption and you look at it through such different eyes, like you were saying, Steph, but you also see the game that's being played for the first time, and it's quite staggering, right? What's going on? Ray, do you want to jump in? Do you think we've? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think for me, for the work that I have been doing since 2015, there's just a lot of confusion also, and a lot of unclear things. That's why sustainability in fashion is not really moving as fast as we would want it to be. So the very first one that I have seen and observed through also with the community that I'm working in is, number one, I think fashion in general it's hard for us to separate that from all the negative impacts. I mean, to see the negative impacts of what fashion is creating, because that's what everyone mentioned, that fashion is actually about aspiration. It's about beauty. It's never about functionality. Like, if we talked about the plastic straw, it was easy for us to transition to a reusable one versus the single plastic, because the function of the straw is for you just to drink. It's never about the aesthetic. But with fashion, everyone talks about sustainability, but at the end of the day, when you are shopping, you are considering on how would that dress looks good on you. And that's basically the consideration. What we have seen, even with the swapping movement that we have, sustainability is a good entry point, but for them to stay engaged and for them to stay in the movement, it needs the product or the service needs to speak for itself, which is, would it help me to look good? Would it help me to be presentable when I meet my friends, when I go to one event? Because that's the function of fashion, and something that is hard for us to separate from the fashion industry. And I think the second challenge that we have seen also is that we are very much unsure of what sustainability is in the fashion industry. A lot of us sees that as a very linear way, which is, if you want to be sustainable, you just need to buy organic cotton, and there's no colors, there's no prints, which people assumes that it's going to be like ugly and not presentable, which is not fashion. And that's something that we don't understand if we talked about fashion. And then the other one, the other understanding of what sustainability is or not sustainable is the fast fashion, the ultra fast fashion. And us not understanding that there's actually a lot of ways for us to be sustainable, but it's hard for us to think that there's different ways for us to do that, because we are also programmed to just pick A and B. There's nothing in between. So I think that's the hard part of, like, if I want to be sustainable, I cannot buy fast fashion item. So people, when they have that dilemma, if they want to go A and B, they just go to their old habit because it's easier for them, and not really digging deeper of, like, there's a lot of ways for you to do it, and understanding of how you can be sustainable.
Yeah. All right, so one of the quotes that I liked is, fast fashion is far from cheap. Someone somewhere is paying the real price. And I thought that was very accurate. And it's also the somewhere message is paying the price, and that's the environment. But a lot of the focus at the moment is obviously on fast fashion. And I think it was about 12 months ago, a report came out that was linking some of the top brands in the world to deforestation in the Amazon. And that's obviously through the leather products. So, I see the fashion industry as equally excessive, and it's obviously responsible for the same things: environmental pollution, deforestation, slave labor, unsafe working conditions, and more. You guys will know more about this than me, but, we used to have 2 fashion seasons a year and maybe 1 or 2 sales a year. And now it's like it's every week. But actually, if you bring in the super fast fashion chains, it's basically on the hour. We have new fashion options. With Jen, we were talking about the landfills in Africa that are full of the clothes that we might wear once, or maybe not even wear once because it didn't fit. So, we can't be bothered sending it back, so we just throw it in the trash. But the other side of things that I found personally really heartbreaking is when the pandemic hit, all of the top global fashion houses around the world basically abandoned their supply chain workers right across the Asia Pacific in particular. Cambodia was hammered, and they left these women in absolute destitution and didn't provide any support for them to get them through. And obviously in those cases, they can risk obviously domestic abuse and violence, but also being sold as slaves, right? So, and the other side of the fashion industry that I struggle with is women predominantly buy fashion, and it's an industry where women suffer for our fashion, and that disconnect, that's the thing that when I buy something, I work hard to find out where it comes from. And Jen, you'll pick me up if you see me buy something that you don't believe is correct. And I really appreciate that because I do try hard to know. But, how do we make sense of that? Just the broader fashion industry and our lack of connection. And it's actually like the drugs movement as well, right? When you see people partying on cocaine in New York, and then you see the imagery of murder and war in Latin America, like people aren't connecting the dots there either, So we don't seem very good at making the connection between what we do and the suffering that it creates. Anyone got any thoughts? I know that's lots of issues in that one.
I would say, as somebody who's been a sewing teacher amongst all the things that I do for coming up to about 10 years, is one of the things that students will say to me when they first come into the classroom is, I want to learn how to sew because buying clothes is so expensive, and I'm going to make it for cheaper. What happens by the end of the 3-week beginners course is they realize that it's not actually any cheaper to make their own clothes, but they've just gained so much more respect for what people who make our clothing, how it's made. So I would say to everybody, for, not just that, but also to learn so you can mend your clothes and keep them out of landfill, but learn how to sew. Gain respect for the people who make your clothes and learn how to sew, and ultimately learn how to fix your own garments too. Keep them out of landfill. Yeah.
Research the brands that you're buying from.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a big, actually there was, before we came on, I was talking to you about a brand that I wanted to, if it came up, I wanted to be able to make sure I got their web address right. But they're an Australian brand. Their brand name, their website, I think, is a.bch world. And they have their website is completely transparent. They also have pages dedicated to their answers, because as I said before, it's multifaceted. The answers that they have come up with to to help the fashion industry and educate people and to stop their product from being part of the problem. But they've also got a disclaimer about how they're continuing that work as well, because even though it's probably one of the most thorough websites I've ever seen as far as education and transparency and solutions, they know that they haven't yet found all the answers and they're constantly working on it. So, yeah, you can research, but how do you know? I was looking at Better Cotton Initiative the other day, because you see it a lot in affordable lifestyle brands like Kmart. And I just wondered how good it actually was for the planet. And cotton really itself, while organic cotton, and I think Ray touched on this before, it's not actually a solution. Sure, it's better in some ways, but in other ways, it's worse. It takes more land to grow the same kinds of yields, more water. It's often grown in places where food can be grown. It's in very arid, dry places as well. I mean, look at the Murray River here in Australia. It's very, very dry and dusty. Not at the moment, actually, because we're having floods. Funny that. So is the rest of the world, the Southern Hemisphere at least. I've lost track of what I was saying because there is so many different ways to take this conversation. But it's really hard to actually get to the bottom of where your clothing comes from. And unless the brands tell you where it's coming from, and also they often don't know where it's all coming from as well. So it's really challenging to find those kinds of answers. Better Cotton Initiative, those large, affordable lifestyle brands, they fund that. So how do we know how good it really is?
So transparency and trust, they're the big issues. And we're going to have a cotton shortage because the crops in the US were wiped out and the crops in Pakistan were wiped out. So cotton's going to be in short supply for years to come. And that potentially could create even more demand for fast fashion because we can't get cotton. So it's kind of a bit of a concern. But what about you? What about you other guys? What do you think on the luxury brands and their lack of? It's from what I'm seeing, and I'm not like you guys. I don't spend all my time in this topic, but they're just not changing. They're just not changing, and like many other industries, they're not changing. But nature will ultimately decide our future if we don't decide first, right? So, and nature is deciding. I'm sitting in a flood here as well. Steph, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary Slay yet.
No, I haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, it's free on, I think it's at Waterbear. I'm forgetting the name of the streaming platform, but you can just Google it. It's amazing, very, very eye-opening documentary by a friend, I think of a few of us here anyway, Rebecca Capelli. And it really pulls back the glamorous curtain of the luxury fashion industry, and it deep dives and shows what happens to get fur and to get leather and how dirty it really, really is. And so I think having documentaries like that and resources like that truly showcase how, like, what really happens to get the products that we are using on a daily basis, and to prevent some of that disconnect that happens, I think is really important. And I think it's only a matter of time. I mean, we've seen a lot of brands from consumer pressure banning fur, and a lot of fashion weeks around the world banning fur, but that's just one animal product that's used widely in the fashion industry. So, we've seen that consumer pressure and collective action can actually lead to some, kind of global change in the fashion industry. And so I think it's only a matter of time that kind of the leather conversation also probably catches up to that. And just, because when you see it, it's really hard to unsee it and to not look at leather products in a completely different light. And so I think luxury is going to be having, hopefully, a bit of a reality check when more people, like when we really have that collective tipping point. But I think we're a little bit far away from that at the moment, but it is good to watch those kind of things and to really educate. And then consumer pressure and headlines and stuff, it does work on the fashion industry. We've seen it in the past. So I think, we just need to have really good collective support and people getting behind certain things, because there are things that have shifted and that we've seen, it's not all doom and gloom. There is some positive things that are happening and some things that we can say, okay, well, that worked. Let's recreate that. Let's do it again. And so I think, the luxury industry has a lot to answer for, but they're also very good at hiding their tracks. And so we need more people like Rebecca who are going to go out there and risk their lives to do very investigative journalism and then, be able to share that with the masses and for free. So I think she was very clever about the way she did all of that. And we have a lot of support for what she's done.
Awesome. I haven't had a chance to watch it. I've had it on my list and I need to find it. So one of the things that I've sort of witnessed in Asia with this emerging wealth, in any of the luxury brands, that you've got a line out the door. Actually, I saw it in Melbourne as well, which I refuse to get in line to go into a shop. I just don't get that, how anyone could line up to go into a Gucci store. But the growth in Asia, I mean, I was reading a McKinsey report. I mean, it's skyrocketing, the Chinese wealth, in purchasing luxury brands, and they're not paying attention to the stuff that we're paying attention to. It's just not even part of the language yet. And obviously it needs to happen within the culture that change happens. And maybe what the Chinese government is doing at the moment, where it's trying to sort of curtail the excessiveness of the culture that's sort of grown in China, maybe that government will actually be successful. But I'm very concerned about what I'm seeing from a growth perspective just in this region alone. I mean, do you guys feel that too? Susanna, do you want to, or Ray?
Yeah, I think that ultimately fashion is a business and profits are predicated on growth and selling more, new collections. This is regardless of whether you're talking about fast fashion brands, luxury brands, mid-tier, wherever you kind of are on that scale. And I think, now what we're seeing with the sustainability conversation kind of happening concurrently is that a lot of the world's biggest brands, again, wherever they sit on that scale, have these legacy issues of, the amount that they produce, the size of which they've grown to. We started by talking about fast fashion, which is in itself one of the most profitable ways to make fashion. You're making the biggest margins, your cost price is the lowest possible. Luxury fashion, it's the general assumption that the cost price, i.e. the price that it costs to make your products, is a lot higher. And generally, I would say that a lot of luxury brands do produce better quality than fast fashion, but they're still using similar materials. Like you can walk into a Longchamp store right now, for example, and a lot of the dresses are polyester. There's different grades of that. You know what I mean? But there's also very, very, very different markups. Bit of a sidebar, but yeah, it's this growth, year-on-year growth as the measure of success for fashion business. Year-on-year growth in terms of sales, I think, is one of the key tension points when it comes to how do we move to a more sustainable industry, because sustainable fashion in itself, can the fashion industry be sustainable if year on year they are looking to grow and sell more and sell more? Wherever you sit on that kind of tier and price point of product that you're selling, it almost feels to me like we will continue to have this cycle of conversation until that kind of elephant in the room is addressed. And that's not easy, because that means, looking at ways to measure the success of a business in a different way beyond just profit from sales. And we're seeing this, I would say, we're seeing businesses shift their business models. You have H&M, which has moved into secondhand. You have other businesses and platforms, even brands which are known for more sustainable practices like Ganni and other mid-tier brands launching resale. You're seeing, luxury brands look at from anything from B2B services to resale, pre-loved, kind of building that into their business model. So you're seeing this, I believe we're seeing this shift, and we're going to continue to see this shift into more circular business models as a way to shift revenue. And perhaps, I think in the future, I think it's yet to be seen, and I think it's quite a way off, but I think that this is going to perhaps be a way for brands to produce a bit less, or that's at least what I would hope, because ultimately I think the elephant in the room is that's what the world actually needs. We don't need the amount and frequency of new stuff that is being produced, whether it's a Chanel bag, whether it's a Zara jean, whatever it is, because otherwise we continue to perpetuate the traditional cycle of consumption that is both demanded by consumers and, driven as well by brands. It's like this cycle of, desire, everything. It links into what Steph mentioned earlier about psychology. Also super fascinated by that, and how we can really shift mindsets and attitudes. It kind of has to come at all levels. And I think not just for consumers, but brands, and how they view their business in order to reassess growth. There are a lot of conversations about this where you can Google, there's, the term degrowth and the concept of degrowth, which has been discussed a lot in kind of fashion, sustainable fashion and academic circles over the last 5 to 10 years. One lady I love who has done a lot of research on this is Kate Fletcher. I thoroughly recommend anyone reading her work. She has a project that she started, I think it was a couple of years ago, called Earth Logic, which is kind of a charter of setting out ways which the fashion industry could move towards, move away from its reliance on, the year-on-year growth predicated by the sale of new things. But that concept in itself is really, really scary to fashion industry people. It means disrupting, and it's not a word that's like well received, to be honest. It's like degrowing. What do you mean degrowing? Like growing less? Because our whole culture is, it ties into, the whole idea of what success really is. We should be getting better. We should be selling more. We should be making more profits. Every year we should be growing. So I'd highly recommend people look up that work and that concept, because I think it's, while a way off actually being implemented or even really addressed by a lot of brands, I think it has some really, gem nuggets of information and ideas and concepts to think about to really make a difference when it comes to making the industry more sustainable, genuinely doing so, I would say.
Awesome. All right. I know Ray needs to jump off. So, but if you got 2 minutes before you can jump off, yeah. All right. So I want to talk about solutions, right? Because there's no point talking about it if we're not going to come up with the solutions. And I want to start with you, Ray. So there's this campaign called Take the Jump. I don't know if you guys have come across it. And basically what they're saying is, if we want to get sustainable, we should not be buying any more than 3 new items of clothing a year. And I know a lot of people would screech at the concept of that, but it's a really good way to sort of think about it, right? If you can only buy 3 things a year, that's good, right? But I think most women would buy more than 3 bras a year, so I don't know how realistic that is, right? So, but Ray, like, give us some tips.
Right, agree. I think the sustainability comes in different forms and shapes, and we also need to understand that we have to contextualize that, like what you have mentioned. If a person is it ideal for me to just have 3 items? But sometimes also we have to have an idea that being sustainable, like we have been sold out to the idea that we need to buy our way into sustainability, where most of the time otherwise being sustainable actually is looking in what we have in our closet and using what we have in our closet or in our wardrobe. So I think that's one step that we can actually take in for us to easily be sustainable, not just looking outside of what we can do, but rather looking inside of what we already have and what we can do with them. So I think that's a very easy step for everyone, because everyone has that. And mentioning about having it contextualized. So I think the very thing that we also should do is, and the lifestyle that we live in. So for us to search or provide solution for different things, because like for example in our community we have different members who has different kinds of lifestyle. We have a person who works in an advertising industry where they need to wear different clothes and assume not to repeat clothes. So because of that kind of lifestyle, they would either go for a subscription based or like swapping, where they can wear an item that is good and one time and they don't repeat, but in a way they are still sustainable. So I think the very important thing also is not just jumping into what other peoples are doing just because it's called sustainable, but rather going and understanding what your lifestyle is and finding a solution that will fit into that lifestyle, so So it's easier for you to transition to that solution rather than just adapting what other are doing just because you think it's right for you. So I think that's the only two things that I would say if we're looking at solutions in a very personal perspective. So again, as much as I would want to stay, unfortunately I have a next appointment, but thanks for having me, and I hope to see everyone again.
Thanks, Ellen. We'll see you soon. All right.
See you.
All right. So when Ray was talking about the subscription model, that actually reminded me of renting clothes, because that's becoming, I think it was Marks and Spencer's that announced that they're going to trial renting. Have you guys seen that? They're doing something like that, which was very revolutionary. We've got Alia here, I just put a comment up, but it was covering Ray's face. But, she agrees with Ray, like really looking at what you own, going through your closet and making sure, what you keep, what gives you joy. But sorry, who was that, you, Susanna? Or Jen?
That was me. I was just going to say that there's a couple of smaller models here in Australia of like small store owners who are selling on consignment or selling secondhand, but also hiring as well. So it is something that, and people have been hiring out handbags and other kinds of high-end accessories for a while, but this was more, these stores are more like vintage level. I agree with Ray too, like buy less. I like the ethos of buy nice, not twice. And I recommend like an emotional, durable design ethos as well. So when you buy something, have some kind of kinetic connection to it. Like I bought this top from the markets from a graphic designer. It was the last one she had there. She's a really nice girl. She hand draws all these Australian animals. I make my own clothes. If you're repairing your own clothes, you bought something on holidays, somebody handed it down to you like it's your grandmother's or something like that. They're all emotional kinetic connections that you can have to your clothing. If it's designed well, so that emotional, designed well, then you're going to, even when you don't want to wear it anymore, it can end up in an op shop somewhere. Somebody else is going to recognize it for its beautiful design, and they're going to keep wearing it. What we're seeing now is an influx of those cheaper brands being pushed into the charity stores to be resold, but the quality at that level is still pretty low. And we're seeing less and less good quality secondhand clothing because people just aren't buying at that higher end anymore. When it does need repairing, they're just throwing it out rather than having it repaired. And op shops don't have the facility to repair it either, so that ends up in landfill too. And then durable, make sure it's going to last, and when it is starting to break down, do repair it and embrace repairing too. Like if you go onto Instagram, you can see lots of people under the hashtag doing visible mending or shishiko style mending, which is about embracing the fact that your clothes are mended, not trying to hide it, using embellishments, contrasting threads. We've woven patterns, geometric patterns to repair your clothing, but also add a little bit of interest in personalizing those items too. I think it's really important to remember too, going back to not buying so much just because it's in your wardrobe. If you're not wearing it, it's still textile waste. So, it doesn't have to be in landfill to be textile waste. So as Alia said, I think that's how you say your name, look at what's in your wardrobe. And if you're not wearing it, pass it on to somebody who is. If it's broken and you're not going to wear it, mend it or have somebody mend it, and then pass it on. Don't make it somebody else's problem. We, like many charities, we get a lot of dumping on us as well, and we can't afford to dispose of it. So for us, it's not clothing, it's textile waste. You'll see people come, like fabric waste. So we'll see people come in and just sneaky drop a little bag of something off to us. Now, if that was a valuable donation, why are you creeping around? So if you're embarrassed by your donation, it's not worth donating. Find another way to dispose of it that's ethical. And what's really big here in Melbourne at the moment is a brand called Up Apparel. The similar brands have been around for a while, like Textile Waste Melbourne. I think that's Textile Recyclers Melbourne. They look at often downcycling fabrics to make them into something else, but the difference between Textile Recyclers in Melbourne and Up Apparel is that Up Apparel have really put a lot of emphasis into the marketing and getting people to recycle or downcycle their unwanted textiles that are no good for selling. So yeah,
what's that recycling? The textile recycling company's name?
There's a couple around. The two that I know of is Melbourne Textile Recyclers and Up Apparel.
Right. Have you guys heard of that in Asia? I haven't heard of that in Asia. I mean, there's obviously different opportunities, but I haven't seen anything about textile recycling in this region. Have you guys? Sorry.
There is textile recycling. Oh, go ahead, Jenny. Go ahead.
No, there you go.
There is a textile recycling plant in Malaysia that one company here called Kloop works with. Kloop is a platform that facilitates, circular fashion. They do a lot of clothes swaps. They collect donations. They recently started an initiative whereby you can adopt a recycling bin, which has been kind of initiative that they're working with different agencies and stakeholders on. But the concept is you can drop your products into these bins and it's actually recycled, redistributed. So it goes through the kind of layer of R's, items that can be repaired, are sent one place, and they are then recirculated at their swap events. Certain items can be upcycled, and anything that cannot be reused in any way, shape, or form is then sent to this recycler, which is based in Malaysia. But Singapore does not have a textile recycling plant, to my best knowledge, and I could be wrong. So, but there is investment that's come into this area, and there is some sort of plan for that. I'd need to look up the exact details, but I have heard of that on the horizon, actually creating a recycling plant here.
Right.
On the outskirts. But yeah, if I can find that name of the textile recycler, I'll let you know.
All right. And Susanna, what else what is some of your tips of what people can do to massively reduce our fashion consumption? What would you suggest?
I think really, Jenny made some amazing points and I agree with all of them. I think that my way of, having gone through that journey myself as a consumer as well, my way of approaching things is really just, thinking more deeply about if I really want something. I think this is something that anyone can really do. And reducing consumption doesn't just mean reducing your consumption of new products in a store, whether that be a fast fashion brand, whether that be a sustainable brand, whatever it is that you're acquiring firsthand. You can acquire too much secondhand stuff too. You know what I mean? You can get addicted. I know people who've become addicted to acquiring secondhand stuff because it feels like you have an excuse to, because it's secondhand. Like you can over thrift, you can over swap. It's something Ray and I discuss sometimes about phenomenon he sees. I think it really just comes down to trying to get to know you and your tastes and your preferences just that bit more. I think one big reason why we often create a lot of textile waste ourselves, and we look into our wardrobes and we think that's not me, like, why did I ever wear that, is because we are also on our personal journey of growth in life. I think we change, our taste change, our style changes. I think that's natural. But I think one thing that has helped me massively is just really trying to be more in tune with what my personal style really is. And that's helped me avoid a lot of purchases that I would have regretted, or, items that would have sat festering in my wardrobe. And really, that's just the best way I can say to start doing that is maybe looking at what you already have, seeing if there's a trend. Do I have lots of jeans? Am I a big jeans and t-shirt wearer, for example, or do I have a lot of like one pieces? Do I not own a lot of separates? Like, what do you feel most comfortable in? A personal stylist I work with, Sarah, her Instagram is the Re-Outfitter. She's actually a personal stylist who operates with sustainable values. She taught me this really awesome tip, and I think anyone could do this who's listening. Over the course of the next week or 2 weeks, I think 2 weeks is a good idea. All of the clothes that you actually wear day to day, at the end of the day, you might have to delay your washing, leave them out in a separate pile. And like, you can see then by the end of the week or etc. what clothes that you've actually been gravitating to more in your wardrobe, and then look at the rest of the stuff that you don't wear, and then analyze, okay, would I try and pair this with some of these items that I obviously wear all the time? If not, then I don't know. It's kind of spotting those trends and patterns with yourself, and that can in turn inform how and why you buy in the future. And I think that's a tip that I've taken on over the last year, and it's kind of helped me reduce my consumption overall, because it eliminates a lot of things that I thought that I might want, but then I realized, actually, no, this isn't me. This isn't fashion that's suiting my lifestyle. It's not suiting, my day to day. It's not actually suiting my personality. And I think learning, more about your personal style is a bit of a journey of self-discovery, I think. But that just can help to reduce unnecessary consumption and hopefully lead to you owning a wardrobe full of things that you genuinely love and are very, again, as Jenny mentioned, have that kind of kinetic connection to. And that's, I think, something anyone, regardless of, socioeconomic background, can or accessibility, size, can look at doing today.
Yeah, I love both of you mentioning that sort of connection and thinking. We need to think more. But if that disconnect from what we wear, I think it's a really important point to raise. I was at the tail end of you had your Sunday best, because I'm a bit older than you guys, right?
I had those.
Yeah,
one good outfit.
Yeah, and you're the tail end of that too, right? But we're so far from that time, but it's not progress. We think it is, but it's not actually progress, because it's doing so much damage. Steph, what are your tips?
I think there's a few different things. So there are some things I think that we're always going to buy new. Like, I personally wouldn't want someone else's activewear. Because, especially being in Asia, like in Singapore, and the humidity. So I think there's always going to be some things that you probably, like underwear and bras, that you're just going to get new. So for those new purchases, I think I always message the brands if it's not clear on their website, and just try to have a dialogue. Like, if there's something I find that I really like, I just want to know, like, where to factory, how's it made, what are the fabrics. And, there was one brand that I messaged a couple of years ago, and they were super unsustainable. And they said, actually, we're working on it. So like, come back in like 2 years and check us out again. And I was like, okay. And I did. And they were now producing ethically. So then I was like happy to purchase from them, So I just think there's like a patience and like the not the instant gratification, but it can be like long gratification with your fashion journey, and you can have a lot of fun with it. And then I think the other big thing for me is like, we don't need new there's like thunder and lightning. I don't know if you can hear that. It's like crazy weather in Asia right now. But you really don't need new for special occasions. So for my wedding, I just recently got married. I wore a pre-loved wedding dress. that I found secondhand, and I got it for half price, and it had only been worn for a few hours, and it was absolutely amazing. And for my hens event, I had a top that I've had for about 6 years, and I paired it with a secondhand skirt that I got, like a Dolce & Gabbana skirt that I got for like $70. I've always wanted a tutu, and I finally found one, and I was so happy. And it was $70, you know, and I got to wear, like, you know, have a great fashion story, which I get excited about. And I didn't need to find new stuff, but I still had a new outfit that I was excited about, like new from me, but it wasn't new. And I just think, like, kind of normalizing those conversations and realizing that, like, it's an adventure, and it can be really fun, and you can really treasure the stuff that's in your wardrobe, opposed to just looking at everything and being like, oh my God, I have nothing to wear, and like all the, you know, the typical things that run through our heads. And I think if you know, finding the part that what you care about, because it is very overwhelming. There's so many facets to this, and it's so integrated. So what is the part that maybe upsets you the most, or the part that excites you the most to improve, and just kind of focus there. I mean, it doesn't need to be doom and gloom. It can be joyful. It can be fun and an experience and a learning journey. And I think we need to kind of approach things with a different mindset to you know, get away from this fear mongering and all the negative and heavy stuff. Of course, we need to know what's happening, but then where can you focus your attention and your part of your fashion evolution that's going to actually bring joy into your life? And I think fashion and clothes does bring a lot of joy to a lot of people, and you can continue that. It's not a sacrifice to make different choices.
Nice. I love that. And all three of you are really awesome on social media at sharing this. And Steph, I love the way you tell your stories about your clothes, and I saw your wedding ones. And the one thing I would add is really talk about it. Talk about it on social media, what you're doing, what you're changing, any thoughts that you're having. Like, you know, one of the best things that we can be doing is sharing our journeys of change and evolution, because that will inspire other people, but also directly person to person in your communities. You know, talk to the people around you. Like, you know, there's a lot of swap shops here, and you know, I want to set up a new swap shop called Boobs and Butts, because, you know, because it's a different. There's another type of woman that's not usually included in the swap shops. You know, it's from a size perspective, and, you know, get your community together and have lots of different layers to it. And yeah, like you said, have fun with it. You know, it's not dark. It can be a beautiful thing. All right, quick one. Resources. The one thing people always say, I talk to everyone everywhere about the climate every chance I get, if they want to. I try not to depress people, which has been a bit harder this year. But you know, websites, associations, podcasts, books. Where you know, there's one place where you can go and find businesses that have no slavery in the supply chain, and I can't remember what it is. Do you guys know which one it is? Anyone? I'll find it if not. But what would you guys recommend?
There's a new podcast by ABC called Threads. It's very similar to a lot of the other podcasts they've put out, like the Pineapple Project, in the way that it's palatable, entertaining information. You don't have to put time aside to listen to it. You can listen to a podcast anywhere, and it's informative and well researched, and lots of resolutions there and information. Yep. Awesome.
Susanna?
I would recommend that anyone follow Fashion Revolution. They're a big non-profit headquartered in the UK that talk a lot about, you know, sustainable fashion, or the fashion industry's impact on both people, planet, and increasingly animals. I think that that's a great resource for anyone who's, you know, a beginner, just learning about this space, or wants to follow along with the latest updates. Also, organizations like Remake, I think, are excellent to follow. We at Zeren post a lot of content, trying to do a lot more recently, but posting a lot of content about this and articles on our website. As is Steph, Green is the New Black. They have an amazing site and lots of great content. And we also have a podcast which we've recently started called Made Better, which you can find on anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And that's largely talking to, you know, lots of different people in the industry / you know, authors, brand owners, producers, just about ways that we can create and consume more consciously. So whether you're a consumer, whether you're a brand owner, whoever you are, there's something to take away from those conversations and learnings and insights, which might inspire you to think a bit more deeply, and make it natural to think more deeply. I think that's what we all want to move towards, is like making this thinking part not an effort, not a sacrifice. It's just becomes part and parcel of the way you operate in the world. Yeah, those are good conversations to dip into as well.
Yeah. All right. And I agree with you. Green is the new black. It's a big education resource for me. Steph, what else?
I think depending how you like to consume stuff, there's something for everyone. If you're an apps person, then you should definitely download Good On You. Or there's another one in the browser that I've just blanked on the name, that actually looks at all the websites and suggests better brands if they're not like a sustainable brand. And I'll find it and send it to you, Andrea. But for me, like those are just fantastic, like for apps and browsers. And it literally means as you're on the internet, looking at brands, it gives you the information that you need and suggests better brands. So I think those kind of things make it way easier. I think if you like documentaries, definitely watch Slay that I mentioned, and The True Cost, which I think is still available on Netflix. That's eye-opening. It's old, but it's all about the Rana factory collapse and the birth of fashion revolution as well. So that's a really great resource. And then one of my favorite Instagram accounts is the Sustainable Fashion Forum. They do an amazing job, really funny memes, but like, beautiful content. And they're getting way more in depth into sort of like all the issues with the fashion industry. And I just think they do a really great job on that. So there's lots of amazing influencers and Instagram accounts. There's publications that you can follow. There's apps, there's browser apps. There's a lot of ways that you can make it easier on yourself, depending on how you like to consume or engage in this topic.
And it's Ellen MacArthur is the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is where you can go and really learn about the circular economy too, right? Ellen MacArthur, I got it right? Yeah. I've always found that a really good one from an education perspective, just understanding it. All right. I'll put these all in a blog and share it with everyone and try and get the links to it. If you got anything else that you want to send to me. And Aliyah, thank you. So the book is Loved Clothes Last, How the Joy of Rewearing and Repairing Your Clothes Can Be a Revolutionary Act. Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. All right, ladies, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your wonderful brains with us and passion. We're going to be back on the 4th for the next Climate Courage, and I'm going to have Dr. David Coe and Richard Busolato, who wrote the book, The Unsustainable Truth, which I find a really, really fascinating book. They're investment bankers and they've been in the industry for more than 30 years. And I'm going to ask them about money and, how do we prepare? What should we be spending on? Where should we be investing? Will currencies that we're used to today even be a thing in the future? Because I hear a lot of people talking about finances, but they talk about it within the context of the world that we had. How do we get prepared for the world that is coming and the world that will be? What does that look like? So, Steph, Susanna, Jen, and the lovely Ray, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And please follow these guys. They're all awesome on social media and they're all doing amazing work. So take care. See you guys.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.